Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us here today. My name is Shannon McNeil, and I'm a business planning advisor for the Cape Breton Partnership, and will be your host on behalf of Carla Arsenault, the president and CEO of the Cape Breton Partnership. One of our primary purposes at the Cape Breton Partnership is to connect people from any industry to supports, information, and resources they need to be successful. For this reason, we are hosting this webinar series to provide you with a host of different topics to help address concerns for Cape Breton businesses. We also have a host of resources available on our website, capebretonpartnership.com, which we update multiple times daily as information and updates from the federal, First Nations, provincial, and municipal governments become available. These webinars also always go better with lots of questions, so please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to post any questions you may have for our panelists, who will address them at the end of the webinar, time permitting. So now I would like to welcome subject matter experts Shannon McFarlane, the Director of Content, and CEO Darren Gallup, both of Securacy, which is a business based here in Sydney, Nova Scotia. And thank you both for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Start my video here, get this going. All right, you see me okay?
Yeah, we can see you.
Awesome, great. So my name is Darren Gallup, CEO of Securacy, and basically what we do is our expertise is around information security. And so what that generally means, it can be a little different from one business to another, but a big component of information security, which I think a lot of people are unaware of, is it's actually really focusing on risk, sort of addressing risk, understanding the critical assets and functions of a business. And on top of all the cyber stuff like firewalls and encryption and passwords and all those technical controls that get implemented to help protect business from cyber incidents, we also do a lot of stuff basically to just mitigate risk in general. So we focus a lot on business continuity and disaster recovery. And so on a high level, business continuity is basically having processes in place and having plans in place so that if there are disruptions or potential disruptions, like looking at all the bad things that can happen to a business, how do you maintain productivity and your ability to service your customers as you navigate different scenarios? And then obviously the disaster recovery side is basically how do you basically put the fire out, sort of thing. So we've been, over the last couple of weeks, we've been able to use our business continuity and disaster recovery planning to basically have our business navigate fairly well through what has happened so far to us in COVID-19. We've been able to move to a remote environment. We had zero loss of productivity across all aspects and divisions of the company. Obviously we do have some sales challenges that have come. There's customers that we have that are in trouble, so we're not completely immune to dealing with some struggle there, but we've been very successful. And then we've done a lot of work with our customers to help them use business continuity processes to basically help themselves move more quickly and then reduce the amount of risk that they're exposed to while they're making changes to their business to accommodate these times. So we've been talking about this stuff a lot. We've been implementing it with our customers, and we thought it'd be great to share it with you guys here today. Shannon, you're muted right now. I think you're talking, but there we go. Awesome. We still can't hear you, Shannon. There we go. We can hear you now, I think.
Can you hear me all right there?
There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, I'm sharing some slides. Let me know when you want me to hit next, Darren.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, so I think we can sort of jump to the next slide there and dive right in. So basically, the idea of having a business continuity and disaster recovery plan, I mean, ideally the best time to have that plan is before an incident happens. So right now we're in the middle of the COVID-19 incident. But though the way we often look at it as well is like COVID-19 is basically the situation that we're all in together, we're all dealing with. But some of those problems and how they affect your business are happening at different time intervals. For example, and also even regionally. So for example, one of the things we addressed recently is that we don't know, some of the hardware that we use, the computers that we use for our software developers are not available at Future Shop. Or sorry, at Best Buy or Staples locally. And the time to order that equipment now is exceptionally longer than it used to be. So things like that. So all of a sudden, something as simple as somebody working at home and their cat pouring a cup of coffee over a computer could take productivity down of a critical employee for several weeks while you wait for a machine to be assembled and sent to you. So those are the types of things that, thinking about, we're going through this COVID-19 experience, but the changes that are happening in your business are happening at different times. So basically, the reason that you want to have a business continuity and disaster recovery plan, because it allows you to basically sit down and assess all the important functions of your business. So looking at them, there might be situations where, like I mentioned before, you have a hardware requirement. So making sure you have certain hardware. You may want to look at things like people getting ill. Like it's possible that in a couple of weeks, somebody in your team gets ill. Is there a plan? Is that person replaceable, or temporarily? Is somebody able to step in? Do they have the passwords? Do they have the skill set? These are the types of things. So I think, it would be great to have your business continuity plan built out a couple of months ago. And I can say, even those who have a business continuity plan that they built out several months ago, most of them weren't thinking about a global pandemic as the likely things. They were thinking of things like the building burning down, or being hacked, or having a crypto lock on their assets in their company. So it's just a factor to think that just because we're in this now doesn't mean that there's not more things coming down the road that we should be thinking of, or now that we've gotten over the initial pain of figuring out these first couple of weeks, actually thinking about the business in the midterm as well, and having strategies and contingencies in place. One of the things we look at, obviously we talk about cybersecurity and protecting assets and making sure that that is safe as you move from working in an office to work from home and whatnot. But we also look primarily at things like health and safety of your company and employees. Like these are factors that are really key in a business continuity plan. Looking at all of the things what are the dependencies for your operations? So if you sell hardware or you manufacture parts, then the components that you purchase are going to be critical. So understanding the timeline and the availability of those materials that you would need to develop your products. Are there alternative ways that you can access? Is there ways you could potentially stockpile, et cetera? So these are the types of things. And then, really it's all about keeping your company functioning during a crisis. So I always make the analogy of a fire. So if you have an office and there's a fire, well, the first thing you do is get everybody out of the office, and then you've got, the fire people are coming in to solve the crises, which is the fire, put the fire out, figure that out. But at the same time, your business is probably going to still have to operate. So, whether it's in another building or a tent or from home or whatnot, that's more on the continuity side. So those exercises and things that you do to focus on maintaining the business at the best level of functionality that you can, while the crisis is being managed on the other side. So we can jump to the next slide now. Yeah, so when we look at we have a thing that we use in the information security world called the CIA triad, and that is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And so when we think about data security or information security, it's the confidentiality side of that, which would be people getting access to information that they shouldn't. The integrity side of that is that the data is correct, and then availability, which is a really big part that we focus on in business continuity. That means that the services and the core functions of the business, the key information that the business relies on, is available. So those are some of the things that we think about in cybersecurity, and in this exercise, we'll focus on availability most. Objectives for a business continuity plan: ensure the health and safety of your employees, maintain your critical functions, ensure that employees have access to the hardware, software, and services to keep the business going. And then obviously protecting the CIA triad as we go through that. Next slide. Awesome. So when do you activate a business continuity and disaster recovery? And basically, when I say activate, generally what you do is you write these plans out. And for most small businesses, it can be a couple of hours of an exercise of bringing a couple of key people together, really identify those key functions, the assets that support those functions, and then looking at all of the different risks that can basically create disruption or cause problems with those assets. Those assets can be people, they can be buildings, they can be software, they can be computers, and then having those plans in place. And then generally in the practice of BCDR, which is what we typically call it in the security space, Generally, it's recommended to do tabletop exercises. So basically testing the functionality, review it, and make sure every 3 months or 6 months that it's tangible and applicable to your business and the current situation, right? So, right now, like we're talking a lot when we're doing business continuity, we're talking a lot about things like when can businesses open, and will they have access? Are their employees able to work? Are they able to pay all their employees? Do they have to try to operate with a reduced headcount? Like these are some of the things that we're talking about right now a lot in this business continuity practice. And then, so, we generally look at anything where there's a 20%, loss of employment or 20% loss of performance in an organization. That's generally the key point that we've addressed in our organization, that we would say, okay, we'll activate the business continued disaster recovery plan. But also in this case, for example, it was sort of, all of a sudden we were told that we had to shut our businesses and that, people had to go home, and all this really happened really quickly. So we actually, activated our plan immediately and started looking at revising it, assessing it, and taking a tally of the assets. We ended up going out and buying computers, buying, adapters, extra phones, putting a process in place if somebody had a technical failure to make sure that we can't, that we don't lose that person and their productivity. We also, looking at what happens if people get sick, or if somebody in their family gets sick and they're not available, making sure there's some lunch and learns between certain employees to ensure that there's proper knowledge transfer, documenting, making sure all of our updated procedures for doing critical things like restarting a main server, make sure that that's documented so it's not in the head of that person who knows that thing very well, and not shared across the organization. So that's a lot of the stuff that we've been working on to improve our business continuity to address this new sort of state of affairs that we're dealing with. Next slide. Awesome. Okay. So the first thing is assessing the risks. And like I said to you guys before, most of what we were doing in business continuity before COVID-19, when we would help businesses with business continuity disaster recovery plans, we'd be looking at things like, what if you get hacked and your server goes down? Or what if there's a breach? Or what if the building has a fire or a flood? Like the type of typical things that generally happen in businesses. And there's a whole list of like common threat factors that we addressed. And I'd be honest to say that I think that most of the lists of threat factors and analysis of potential risks to businesses did not include pandemics. I recently watched the pandemic documentary on Netflix, which was done, I guess, about 8 or 10 months ago. And if you had watched that 10 months ago, I kind of wish I did. I probably would have baked some of that into my business continuity planning in advance of this. But it in the community, in the medical community, and certainly in the microbiology community, it was a thing that was sort of being predicted for a long time. However, I think most of us really didn't ever imagine that this would be the thing. We worried about a lot of things in business, and essentially by opening a business and running your own business, you're obviously exposed to things, a lot of risks, and generally this is a new one. So it's sort of, a lot of recalculating and reassessing. And I think, businesses need to go through that practice. It's really about critical business functions and prioritization of business functions. Can a business function be disrupted? And if so, how long? Like, if your website goes down for a day, is that a problem? And, obviously the nature of the business is going to depict that. If you're a construction company, you're probably not going to go out of business because you have a website go down for a couple of days. If you are a company that sells materials online, then the business is going to suffer greatly from a couple of days of a disruption in the website, for example. The idea of having procedures written out is so critical. I think in small to medium-sized business, and in particular, a lot of stuff lives in our heads or in the heads of key employees. And it's hard to find the time and prioritize the value of having procedure in place, but it's so critical. Like I can tell you, you lose a person that's critical in your business for a couple of days, and you have a technical issue. if you want only one person that can solve that problem and they're not available, that can be really problematic. So having a little bit of sort of cross knowledge there and some documented procedure and a way to share passcodes or whatever sort of confidential protected information are required to activate a certain procedure, having that in place and having that thought out in advance drastically changes the outcome when something bad happens. Alternate business sites are a big part that we look in business continuity. And in terms of COVID-19, that has generally been the idea of working from home. And so, I've talked to a lot of companies over the last couple of weeks that have varying, stories of great success in converting from work to home, and then others that are really struggling. Now, obviously, the nature of the business has a big factor there as well. If it's a cloud-based business where you're mostly, activating or accessing cloud components and dealing with people remotely, like is the case in our business, it's a much easier feat than if you're, say, producing things. I was talking to a company today that has a software component, but they also have a manufacturing component. So they don't have people in their laboratory, they don't have people on site. So they're making all kinds of progress on the software side of their business, but they're lagging substantially on the testing and the development of hardware. So now they're looking at how are they going to do that, and there's companies out there now that are starting to think of things like bringing people back in small amounts, and sort of planning out how they can sanitize office conditions, allow for social distancing, but still have some level of productivity in their lab environments. So those are it all comes down to the actual business itself. The employee communication is really a key one. And I think, when you have employees and something bad, like certainly in this case, the COVID-19, when it started to really dominate the press and there was the idea of things closing and the stock market tanked, obviously everyone starts to worry about their own job security. And I think whether or not you're going to be able to keep everybody, or you're going to be required to let people go, or you're cutting back hours, or anything that's happening in this environment, I think is really critical to have strong communication and transparency with the employees, and that'll make their lives easier. It'll help your company navigate the process, and then it'll make it easier for when you start bringing people back in the event that you had to let people go or reduce their hours. Delegation of authority and responsibility. So I know in our case, I was actually outside of the country when we activated our BCDR. But because it was so well documented, it was really good proof of the value of it, even though it wasn't designed for a pandemic. The team was still able to make the move of full-time work from home, get everybody set up, make sure backups are still being respected, make sure productivity tools were all operating efficiently, and start thinking about what supply chain challenges may we have. That already started to happen before I even got back from the trip. So when I came back and sort of grabbed the business continuity plan, started going through it, I'd realized that the team, because there was proper delegation of authority and responsibility, and the plan was strong, everybody knew who was responsible for what, they were able to actually, on each department, go through and implement pretty much the entire plan. So it was just really, I was sort of jumping in. This is a month ago now. I was jumping in at that point to a plan that was already executed, and I was just basically making fine tweaks and thinking more about things like cash flow, and starting to think about how we can cut costs and increase potentially access to government funding, things like that, ways that we could expand our runway and in plans for some downturn in our market. Next slide. So this is an example of a risk assessment matrix. So generally when you do, this is actually we have a free tool that we launched last week. It's a business resilience free platform. There's no catches. You can sign up if you want to check it out. It creates a couple of policies for your organization, which would give you a policy for remote work. It would give you a policy for BYOD, bring your own device. So people that are forced to do work on personally owned or home devices, networks and whatnot, network security policy, and how networks can be configured at home for optimized security, basic stuff, and also business continuity policy. And then we have a tool also in the free solution that enables you to build out a full business continuity plan and disaster recovery plan in your business. And this is a screenshot from that. And this shows our just as a sample page from one we've done recently. It's a little more security. There's some security elements on there because we're also looking at the fact that hacking activity is almost doubled in the last 4 weeks. So, the same way that we're all trapped home, the hackers are trapped at home, and nothing is, there's no greater opportunity than absolute chaos and commotion. So I know that the Canadian Threat Exchange had found over 80,000 website URLs that are malicious URLs that are themed around COVID or COVID-like subjects, and focused on trying to take advantage of people and businesses as they're navigating government programs and navigating all the different challenges through this. So we did look at viruses and malware, and we looked obviously at the likelihood of somebody eventually at some point becoming ill. And when we do that, we look at probability and criticality. So the probability is like, how likely is that going to happen? For us, for viruses, we assess viruses as low because we have a lot of security controls in place and multiple layers of security control. So even though there's a lot of activity out there within the hacking community, we're pretty immune for us to receive a virus. That might be different in a different business. The criticality is the key one. So, if we were to get a virus in our application, the criticality would be high. And then when we assess the confidentiality, we assess the impact, we look at it from a confidentiality, integrity, and availability perspective. So depending on your product and your service, it's just a really strong framework. It's based on the CIA triad, and it basically just helps you assess if this thing happens, can it induce a breach? Can it induce a challenge where information is false, or can it create an availability issue? And so by going in and addressing all those things, we're then able to build our plans around how we would mitigate risks and how we would respond to various issues. Next slide. Cool. So, I think it'll be exciting to get into more questions, because I know from doing these plans with a lot of different types of businesses, it can look very different from one business to another. But the real component is a critical business function for your company and understanding what that is. And I think a key thing about COVID-19 that's a little different than other types of disasters that we generally plan for in my field of work is, in this case, one of the common challenges that I'm seeing in businesses is loss of revenue. And that can be absolute loss of revenue. So, if you're an organization where, say, you're a hair salon or, something like that, where you have to close, or you're a restaurant or a bar, those industries, and we used to work in the festival industry, they're getting hit really bad. So, in those cases, you go from a revenue model that's pretty reoccurring and pretty predictable to absolutely no revenue. So that's a very different situation, very tough situation. And for a lot of those businesses, that really means going into hibernation. So then, starting to think about, well, how do you go into hibernation quickly? How do you do it in a way where you have the least amount of damage in terms of communication to your stakeholders and your employees? And then what can you do over this time to prepare for returning your business and bringing your business back post this situation? And that's everything from cash flow to being able to stay afloat, to accessing government funding, other funding, loans, et cetera, whatever makes sense to do. We're also seeing businesses that are able to continue on, but they're doing so, in a very reduced sort of way. So, like the example I was talking about earlier, we're dealing with a company that has a software component and a hardware component, and they're really struggling on the hardware component. They can't actually move goods right now. So they're making cutbacks in that hardware side of their business, and trying to figure out a plan for how they bring that back. Meanwhile, they have enough resources where they've been able to focus on evolving the technology on the software side. So they're still making advances. So when things start going back and they start having access and the ability to open up, they've actually got a little bit of a gain on their competition during that time frame. Next slide. Cool. So other things to be thinking about, I think really right now, security awareness training and other education is important. So educating yourself and your employees. I think it's really important. Phishing is huge right now. So we're seeing a ton of phishing campaigns. We use pretty high-end filters, so most of them don't hit our inboxes, but we have had a few that have been very clever, crafted very cleverly, have made their way into our organization. So, and a lot of them are themed around various funding programs available for businesses, or they're themed around COVID-19 directly, or they're just themed around anything really that they think they can trick you with. Like I said, there's over 80,000 URLs. A lot of these times, these URLs aren't used for a website, they're used for an email. So, you're creating an email address that looks close to an email address that you may know. So, an example that, I've seen, like many years ago, somebody tried to create apple.com, and they used a symbol from the Russian language that looked like an A, that if you weren't really looking really hard, you would think it's apple.com. And of course, they were able to emulate the site and trick people into trying to buy Apple hardware. Like, that's an example, right? So, I think awareness and people understanding why COVID-19 is an opportunity for hackers and what's going on, and then some of the best practices is a really a good idea. And we have some awareness training in the free platform as well, if anybody wants to check that out. Work from home policies. I think it's, a good idea to have a policy and figure out, what are your employees doing? So, home networks, if, like, a lot of times people like have a home network where they've had a router put in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years ago. It's never been updated. So it has tons of known vulnerabilities. They have the same password. It's like the name of their dog or something, or they don't even have encryption on it altogether. So, if you have people working from home and accessing confidential information, or doing things that are really important like that in networks like that, you should probably address that and have a bit of a policy and some best practices in place of what makes sense, whether that's, having VPNs for employees, or just, having a checklist for them to upgrade their security settings in their network. And then procedures and workplace habits, to make your company adjust quickly. So we've been really focused a lot on allowing our meetings to start a little earlier and having more conversations, and a little bit of FaceTime with people. Try to use the cameras instead of just using phone calls, just to like create a bit of human interaction. Because, like I say, this is not like a couple of weeks. This thing's going to be going on for, I don't have a number for you. I don't have a glass ball, but thinking in months is obviously a more logical way to go about it. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, kind of thing. But, make sure you're using good project management tools. Like, we use Asana. It's been great. Like, the cloud-based sort of model can be really helpful. Just trying to look at ways. There's tons of stuff available on the internet around, how do you maintain productivity? There's tons of companies that have been remote their whole time. I mean, we have 3 full-time remote employees, so we've already built a lot of that infrastructure in our business. But, having these tools, helping people, sometimes it can be helpful if you have a less technical audience, or your employees are less technical, to have some one-on-one sessions just to help them get set up. Or, if you can find some good video content on the tools that you're using, then sharing that around and just getting people aware to, how to get their tech working properly, and, a little bit around how they can get the lighting properly so you can actually see each other and communicate properly. So anything you can do there to improve management functionality. Cool.
All right, and that wraps up everything there. Thank you, Darren, for all of that. And so we have some time for some questions here at the end that we're going to get around to. So if you have questions specifically around, I would say, since we have some businesses from all over the map, to specify what industry or business you're in. And I know we'd love to hear what are the biggest challenges that you're facing right now with trying to recover from disasters that are already here, trying to avoid oncoming or upcoming disasters that you may see rising in the future, or what are your biggest challenges at this moment for this week? So start dropping those in the chat. I'll be reading those out loud and we'll get to those. And I actually have a question here that is COVID-19 specific, Darren. I think you have some really strong opinions about that, something that we haven't gotten to at all. So there's a question here about sanitizing measures and how can you help customers feel safe? And I know this is a question that's very specific to the pandemic scenario. And we've talked a lot in our business about hand washing and trying to figure out how do you quarantine even the products that you're bringing into your home from deliveries and things.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, I'm not a microbiologist or virologist, so, this is not my field of expertise. In our case, we made the decision to close our office because it was easy to do that. We do have like people, for example, that live in environments where either themselves or somebody in their home is in a risk category. And so one of the things that, we've come up with a process of how we sanitize items that come to the house. So obviously we don't let anybody in the house. People we have a table outside, which is basically a box on a table where people can drop the deliveries that we order, whether it's groceries or whatever supplies that we need. And then we basically have a cleaning station that we wash things as they come in. And that's a hyper sanitized mode where you're looking at like keeping an environment clean because you have somebody at high risk in your home. That's been the biggest area that we've focused on. Using a bleach solution to clean things, let them air dry, and then moving them to where they need to be. There's quite a bit of there's a bit of science around sort of how long can the virus last on a surface that we've dug fairly deeply into. I think the worst case scenario is a scientist was able to find the RNA from the center of the genome. The COVID-19 RNA was able to be read after 17 days, but as you dig into that more, actually, it's the genome itself was deteriorated. You need the entire genome to actually infiltrate somebody, and you need a lot of those genomes depending on the immune system and where that's received. So, I think the key thing is like, they say, I think it was 4 days for plastic and 4 hours for cardboard. We just kind of go with the 4 days model on everything because really a lot of cardboard isn't really cardboard. It's cardboard with polys in it, or it's resin coated, or it's got a painting or an ink surface that would change that. So we sort of went with the plastic, glass plastic, and just clean everything that comes into a work environment. Same thing if we drop a computer, we drop any hardware off to somebody, we deliver it in a bag and give them the instructions on sanitizing that just to minimize it. Now, if you're in an office environment where you've got people coming into the building, then that's a bit of a different beast. And I would suggest looking at what other organizations do and looking at some of the research around that. One of the practices that I've seen our customers utilize is having people designated to go around and sanitize. So you might see it in the grocery store, like, before they hand off the cart gets wiped down, or they have an alcohol spray solution, they spray it and they wipe it. People are wearing masks, things like that. Those are some of the things that you can look at there for sure. I mean, I would recommend looking at and talking to organizations that are more in that space. I certainly don't want to jump into, I'm basing what I've read and what I'm seeing people doing. I do think, though, there's both keeping people safe and making people feel safe. And this is an interesting, I was talking to one company that, they're actually cleaning, but they want to be really obvious about their cleaning because it makes people more comfortable when they see that there's process being taken there. And obviously having, the hand wash stations or the sanitizer stations and having that stuff available is a key piece as well. So people can do that. And education, like just keep people in your organization washing their hands all the time and try to keep as much distance. I've seen organizations where, people are going to work, but they're keeping a cubicle. Like there's some people that are required, some are at home. So they're doing spacing in cubicles. So instead of a person in the cubicle next to you, there's an empty cubicle next to you. And then they're separating out, like spreading out the desks, making more room between people. That's another practice that we're seeing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen a lot of different businesses coming up with really creative things. The spots and lines of tape showing where to stand between lines, the plexiglass in between the grocery store cashier to protect them as well as the guests. I've seen a lot more signs explaining, what measures they're taking, how customers can feel safe. Definitely clear communication, signs, emails, those kinds of things can be really helpful for helping customers to feel more safe and giving them options on how to check out and get their things from the location.
And I've seen like some of the businesses that have bathrooms that are multi-stall bathrooms that they just like create a rule where only one person can be in the whole bathroom at a time. Also, like for anywheres where there's lineups, having 6 foot spaced X's, or another thing that just make it easier for people to not, have to argue about, is this 6 feet or is that 6 feet? Um, it's also trying to keep people feeling good about what's going on. So I think the more you do, like, I love seeing the arrows and the directional, stuff in the grocery stores. It really comes down to the type of business you have. I know another thing that I'm seeing in some of the local businesses that I personally enjoy, because I'm in a home where, we do have high risk in our house. So we're taking substantial measures. I'm not going to grocery stores. I'm ordering my groceries and pulling up and opening the trunk, and they're putting the groceries in, and then we're backing it into the house, and then we're putting on the gloves and the mask, and we're cleaning everything and debagging it, cleaning it, putting it in another box, bringing it in the house. And we're going through that process to just be extra prudent. Yeah, and I think the more you do, like the businesses that I really enjoyed, is I went on the weekend to get some gardening stuff, and they're not letting people in their store. What they do is they have set it up so you can call in your order and you pay it on credit card, and then they bring out your order and it sits out on this bay, and they keep a certain amount. They always have more than 6 feet different, space between orders on the bay, and you pick your time and you go pick up your order. So, some of that stuff is great. And I think too, like if you're selling things in the community, the more you can do things like that make people feel safe, then I think you're going to have a better chance, like, at getting customers. So, like, for example, I went on Facebook and was like, hey, anybody getting any gardening stuff? Like, don't go to Canadian Tire and walk around the store, when you can call a local business and they'll actually put the thing together, and put the order together. You pay for it and you go pick it up. So things like that are good ways also to help in terms of cash flow continuity, if you can figure out ways. The local brewery, Breton Brew, has been doing orders and delivering beer to people's doors, like things like that, right? Thinking outside of the box, like any way you can deliver service like that and not have people have to come in to your store. Because you think, like, for your workers, it's one thing if you have 20 people that have to come to a work environment every day. But if you have the general public walking in and out, like you say at the liquor stores and the grocery stores and stuff like that, that creates a substantial higher risk for your employees than if it's a smaller group of individuals. Because again, in a smaller, you can educate 20 people and you can set up processes in 20 people for 20 people to follow. But if you go in the grocery stores, and I haven't been, but I've been told that despite the arrows and the X's, some people don't care and they just do as they do. And so I think the more you can try to figure out a way to shop, even if there's things in your store that you can go online and you can use social media locally and leverage your customer base to basically sell things or promote things online. And you can showcase the fact that you're going through extra sanitary measures as a way to entice those people. Because most people have either asthma, diabetes, cancer or post-cancer, or they have somebody over 75 or 80 years old in their house. Like, most people have somebody in their household or have some level of concern. So if you can address that and you can find creative ways to address that, I think that can be a selling point.
Yeah. So here's a question. So we have some people in the audience who are from financial services and real estate and some other kind of service-based industries that often have a lot of more kind of face time. So how can those kinds of businesses go about transitioning and coming up with creative ways to continue their businesses, even when their normal way that they interact with customers is now cut off from them?
Yeah, I think communication is the key thing. And again, depending on your business and how many customers you have, like, this is the type of situation where, like, calling every one of your customers, like calling 150 people, that's not something you may generally do. But at a time like this, that can be a really great way to communicate. So if you have each business, again, is really unique, but if you can find a way to service customers, like, there's people that go to the bank that could be using online banking, but they don't use online banking, right? So if this is what we're seeing happen right now is a lot of people that have resisted technology and have just preferred, like, I don't want to order that food online. I'm just going to walk down the road and order my sub. Like, now you don't have the option to do that. So this is forcing a lot more people to navigate into technology. I think, again, like the real specifics to your business, I think there's so many tools out there that can be used to up your technical game as your technical provision as a company. There's tools out there, like let's say for example you have you have a pottery store and you want to sell pottery, like, clearly that's going to be a tough industry right now. But there's tools out there right now where you can build a storefront in an afternoon, and you could take your iPhone and $25 light that you buy on Amazon, and you could photograph your pieces, and then you could put those pieces, you could build a page that enables you to do e-commerce. So there's just like, I think you just need to really need to look at each specific case. Do we have in the question, is it a specific business, or is it sort of a genre?
That's the genre question. So, and here's kind of an interesting follow-up that I don't think we have necessarily expertise in, because we're not really economic forecasters, but I think it's interesting just to get some observations in what we're seeing in the markets right now. Do we have examples of new products, services, or practices that are succeeding in this environment that we might not have heard of already, especially in Cape Breton or Atlantic Canada? I know from my perspective, one of the surprising ones has been games and puzzles are doing really well, whether it's digital and video games, but also just like the tabletop puzzles and games where people can stay inside and do those industries are doing quite well right now.
Yeah, I'm aware of a group of developers that are working on an online version of Tarbish for Cape Bretoners and Cape Bretoners abroad to be able to play. I don't know if I don't think their initiative is much of a commercial endeavor, more than it is just they're doing it for fun. On the Cape Breton side, like, I know, like, for us, we've had the combination of both things. Like, we've had customers that are in trouble, or we've had deals that would have closed that didn't close because of COVID-19. That actually, the first week was a pretty scary week because we saw a lot of things in our funnel get pretty dry. And then, we had some businesses come at us out of nowhere that we didn't expect that were really making pivots. So I don't know of anything locally that's made a very specific pivot. I know that the Cape Breton Food Hub their sales have gone through the roof. People that never even heard of the Food Hub before, we've been ordering food from the Food Hub for a long time. Basically, you're buying good local food versus, the stuff that you get at the grocery store that comes from wherever it comes from. Who actually looks at where stuff comes from at the grocery store? I know I never have. We're seeing at the grocery store, there's a lot of things that are running that are hard to get, but also seeing prices going up. And it's not necessarily just a case of gouging. There's the question of the dollar, and there's the cost of delivering, and there's the, increases in the cost structure of delivering food. So, now we're seeing, a lot of people signing up for the Food Hub. So if you haven't heard of the Cape Breton Food Hub, there's one that's definitely experiencing a lot of growth right now through this. I'm dealing with a company in Boston that's producing rapid blood testing technology. So we've gained their business to help them implement HIPAA compliance, which is a healthcare privacy and security regulations in the U.S. that they need to be able to basically attain before they can go live with their technology. So we're expediting them through the requirements of that. And we've seen another company that's doing some stuff around ventilators that also needed some accelerated security requirements. I'm sure everybody's watched, like, we're on Zoom right now. Like, Zoom's shares went through the roof. Their growth was massive, and then until they started running into their security and privacy issues, which has stifled that growth a little bit. I think there's and also I know another one. I know that the local takeout companies, like the delivery companies, right? Like First Class Delivery. I mean, they're limiting $100 orders per person because they have to cash flow the whole day, and then the debits all come cycling through the next day, and they're so overwhelmed with business. They're constantly hiring new people. There certainly are. I think the reality is like we're all in this together, and the reality is that, like, these adverse times set up for rapid change, and within rapid change there's opportunities. Like, there are opportunities, there are commercial opportunities. They're not going to be commercial opportunities that are available for every business out there. I did also hear of a hair salon that was packaging up packages of stuff that you may need to try to look after yourself at home. I don't think that's going to by any means equate to the same amount of business that they would get having all their chairs full and people coming through the door. But as they're in hibernation, well, laid off staff and they still have some overhead costs, they're able to monetize that by selling stuff and delivering some stuff. So I think you really need to think outside of the box and like chat with some people that may have some good ideas that can help you compile a plan, or look at what other businesses. If you're in a business that repeats itself, like if you're a hair salon, well, I mean, there's hair salons in every city and every town in most of the world. So like go out and look, what are people doing? Like go check out their Facebook pages and their Instagram pages and their Twitter. Like how are they being active? What types of ways are they maintaining relationships with their customers? What ways are they being relevant? I've seen hair salons do workshop, like Zoom workshops, like we're doing, only on how to cut your own hair and how to do your makeup. Like, whatever your business is, I think you just need to think creatively. And like I say, don't be afraid to look at what other people, what competitors or other people in the same industry are doing in other neighboring communities and towns, to see what you can kind of come up with for ideas. It doesn't matter who has the idea, as long as you can implement the idea.
Yeah, as well as looking in other areas, something that too is looking at other countries that have already to come back and try to recover from social distancing and coronavirus, because some of those businesses have already tried to figure out, how do we make our customers feel safe? How do we open back up?
Yep. No, that's a great point.
Where we can absolutely recover. And in the US, certain areas are already talking about, can we open up before other areas? And so it's definitely trying to figure out, what's the right timing? How do you make people feel safe? And how have other businesses, whether it's in your industry or in another country, navigated through that ahead of you?
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. Looking at the areas that have kind of gone through the other side, right? Or going to be there before you are. And look at what does that look like, and the more we can learn. Like one of the things we talked about internally around this is, like, we generally recommend that people spend a little bit of time every week learning, just in general. What we've said numerous times during this is, how can we let's let people have more time to do that, because there's more to learn right now. Like there's the general learning that you do anyways in your field, but now there's the monitoring this evolving situation and how it applies. Like I'm spending more time looking at my talking to my customers than I generally do. I'm spending more time looking at what my competitors do than I generally do, just to basically see how are they coping with this. Is there something that did they come up with a great idea, or one of their advisors have a great idea, or something that we should be thinking about? Looking at what other businesses in adjacent markets that sell to similar customers as we do, or have similar business models, looking at what they're doing, like watching them on social media, having more conversations with investors and stakeholders. Like I'm talking more. I feel like the end of the day now, and like, even though I'm trapped in my house all the time, I am like talking to more people than ever before. And a lot of it is like figuring out what other people are doing. How are they getting access to cash? How are they selling? How are they marketing? How are they dealing with challenges? What kind of challenges are they dealing with their employees after being, remote for X amount of weeks, months? Like, just learn from conversations and talking to other people and seeing what other organizations are doing.
Absolutely. I've been doing a lot of conversation, a lot of watching within, I'm on the marketing side, so a lot of watching what's going on in my industry. For the smaller your businesses, definitely talking to colleagues, people that outside of your network, to really start to try and figure out, how can you brainstorm ideas that you can keep your business going, really figure out what can you do with the constraints that we all have right now when we're stuck at home, and people are really going out only for essential services. I've also seen companies that are listed as essential services, like liquor stores or beer, that are trying to figure out, how do they make themselves provide services that are creative and helpful, and give people a way to kind of relax and feel like things are normal, while at the same time feeling safe doing those things.
Yeah.
And another quick question here that came through the pipeline. A hot topic is focused around mental health. So can you identify some potential ways to keep employee morale up in this time?
Yeah. So we've been doing quite a few things. Like Shannon actually did a webinar on home gardening last week, which was well attended by our staff. And Our developers have been having like gaming events where they'll stay on after work and they'll game together, things like that. One of the things we've implemented is one-on-one check-ins. So like a lot of times when you just like, send an email like, hey, is everybody okay? Do you need anything? Like a lot of times, like most people are not that forthcoming with anything that they're struggling with. But, if you have a face-to-face conversation on Zoom and, have an actual conversation. And again, like as the theme here, as you can see, I'm spending a lot of time talking to people, but I think that's really critical. So having those conversations with employees, I think are really helpful. Like, what are you guys dealing with? What's going on? Is there anything we can help with? I mean, the first round that we did, we identified people that were sitting at a kitchen chair for 8 hours a day working. So, we actually sent somebody out with a truck to go gut the office and bring chairs and desks, and like razors, screen razors, and mouse pads, and like anything that could make people physically comfortable. The other thing we've done, we have meetings every day. Our stand-ups used to be like, all right, hi everybody, let's get to the day. And now we talk about stuff. We have open conversation. We laugh, tell some jokes. We have some time like that. I think that really helps. And the other thing, we do a demo day, and every week we present what we've accomplished. And, we've been trying to be more forthcoming about like, hey, we're actually accomplishing a lot, and like putting stats up and showing the team that, because I think, ultimately people feel good about being productive. It helps people feel good about working. And, I think that's a really good, helpful piece as well. We've also shared a ton of content. So we went through the Techstars Boston program a couple of years ago in 2018. And they've been really they've been providing a ton of content. So we've been sharing stuff, on our online chat, everything from, dealing with kids at home and just ideas and processes. But again, checking in with people, I think, is really key, whether it's, depending on the size of your team, it might be you checking in as the owner, or the CEO checking in an individual, or it could be like what we've done in my organization, because I have so many stakeholders and customers that I'm dealing with as well, is that each department head we've been in our weekly planning meetings have been just be really conscious, like, is it make sure everyone's having conversations one-on-one, making sure that everyone's doing okay, and that we're aware. I mean, you can only do so much, because a lot of the challenges that people have as well are going to be personal. So, they're trapped in their home. So what's their home environment? What's their home life? So, but the more you can do on being, communicating, making their work comfortable, and letting them know that, they can reach out, and that there's some lenience, or there's a way that we can, help if you need time, or if you need, to change schedules or whatnot. We're accommodating to that as we go through it.
Yeah, I think it's been, for our team as a whole, it's been in some ways kind of that adversity brings you a little bit closer, and having that time in the mornings has been really helpful for us to just say, hey, how are you doing today? How was your weekend? How are you feeling? And spending a little bit of time even to talk about things that aren't about work and aren't about the virus, which can really consume all of our conversations, to talk about gardening, or to talk about baking bread, or what games we've been playing, has been a really lovely way to feel like you're connecting and able to have that little semblance of something in the world is normal.
Absolutely. So we do have a very quick poll that you be viewing on your screen very shortly. It's greatly appreciated if you can fill that out to identify any future webinar topics or other improvements that we have. I'd like to take this time to thank you, Shannon and Darren, for sharing your valuable time and expertise. A lot of very relevant information regarding business continuity and disaster recovery. A lot of great tips on how to keep your company functioning in the event of a crisis. So thank you very much for acting as our subject panel experts here. With regards to our next series, our next topic, it's currently being planned, so details will be on our website and will be sent out via social media and e-blast. So with that said, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and have a fantastic day.
All right. Thank you so much. And if you want more information about our free products and webinars or blog posts that we have available on these topics and others that we've touched on, that's all at securacy.com.
Yeah, and if anybody has any other questions that come up too, feel free to email me. It's just Darren@securacy.com. If you have anything specific, whether it's security or business continuity, or if you have, I have access to a whole network of entrepreneurs out there in a variety of verticals. So if you're dealing with some interesting challenges of how you might be able to take advantage of an opportunity or make a better experience for your customers, I've got a lot of people that I could connect you with in that regard as well.
Great.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks again.
Take care.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.